I have a few questions I'd like to ask John Treetä, the designer from Jasper Morrison's studio. So you're a designer, you worked with Sony previously, and now with Jasper Morrison since 2001. Yeah. How did that begin, and what was your first project that you did together?
As you said, I used to work at Sony, and I worked both in the London Design Centre that Sony had and the American Design Centre in San Francisco. And we were trying to develop a new range of audio equipment and televisions for the European high-end market. And so I decided to try to work together with Jasper, and we did a joint project and designed a range of items that included television, hi-fi, CD player. And sadly, those things never went to production. It was meant to be a serious project that would go ahead, but they ended up just being kind of, it became a study. But they did get published, which was quite nice. They were in a few magazines, and as a result, Jasper got quite a few inquiries for more product design stuff, whereas he'd, prior to that, been focused a lot more on furniture and housewares. So he approached me and said that, we have a lot of inquiries now from other companies to do other product projects, and would you like to join the office? So it kind of started from that collaboration, really.
Hey. That's how it tends to go in the design world, isn't it? They start with collaborations and then become and expand into something else. Obviously, Jasper Morrison is known not only as an object designer, but also as a thinker and a researcher. Probably one of the most well-known publications and thought-provoking exhibitions is the Supernormal from 2006 with Naoto Fukasawa. Could you tell a bit more about this? Because you were also part of that.
So the Supernormal exhibition that, as you said, Jasper did with Naoto Fukasawa came about when it was a time when Jasper had started to work in Japan. And he was working with Muji as one of the clients that Naoto Fukasawa was also working with. And I think the term came out of a conversation that he was having with somebody at Muji, trying to talk about the value of their objects and the kind of Japanese approach to simplicity and the way his philosophy was towards objects, and how there's a kind of a nice value in things that are normal. The everyday items somehow are kind of special. But the idea was that some objects are so special, they kind of go beyond that normality, and he kind of just used supernormal as a word to describe what he was trying to explain to this guy at Muji. And so that word, I think, kind of stuck in his head. And from that word, that term supernormal, came about this idea of an exhibition of exploring what things were supernormal. So him and Naoto collected a range of objects that to them were just everyday objects that people are quite familiar with, that the designer often is anonymous, and tried to mix those objects with things that they had designed themselves to kind of explore the theme of are there things supernormal, are these things supernormal, and what is this kind of landscape of supernormal. One of the best examples was that he had an egg in there that was, I think, a goose egg, and so it's quite an interesting object, a goose egg, because everyone knows what an egg looks like, but this looked like an egg, very familiar, but somehow slightly special because it was bigger. It kind of captured it for me.
That's really interesting, and I also like the idea of commenting that sometimes a bit cryptic terminology that we might have when playing with these different ideas. So supernormal is radically normal.
Super extra normal.
So you have a shop in the studio in Shoreditch in East London, which I'm not very good with the microphone clearly, that I visited many times, and I know there's quite an interesting selection of objects that are not necessarily all designed by your studio.
And the shop that we have in the studio kind of grew out of Supernormal in a way. Supernormal was an exhibition that travelled. It was in Japan, it was in Milan, it was in London, and it kind of, the exhibition went away, but the idea lived on. and we bought a new building in London for our studio that was quite a large building, and we had more space than we needed. And so the idea was that it could be fun to have a small shop to sell some of the stuff that we've designed, but also things that are kind of like the supernormal things. So we sourced some of the objects that Jasper showed in supernormal, and opened a shop. And in that shop we sell some, you know, supernormal things and things that Jasper's designed. And it's an ever-changing collection. So if Jasper's traveling somewhere, he'll often find some, you know, for example, really nice wooden spoons in Portugal, and just bring back 10 of them with him, and we'll put them in the shop for a few pounds each, and they'll quickly sell. So the shop's got a kind of a turnover of new things coming and going all the time. And this sort of slowly changing background of everyday objects creates a really nice platform for Jasper to place his objects into, and to give them a kind of an atmosphere, if you like, of familiarity with other objects. And it's nice for us to have Jasper's objects be all together as well, because we design a range of things for various brands that will traditionally be sold through those brands' retail outlets. And so that they're often not together unless they end up in somebody's home who has a few different pieces. So it's nice to bring in the shop Jasper's pieces together, both old and new, and you know, explore this supernormal theme and just have his work kind of be alive, a living thing.
I love the idea of this collection constantly like still evolving and expanding, because that sounds quite organic almost. It's like an everyday life that
I mean, it was a very kind of like simple idea. Let's open a shop, and it's now become a very big shop with you know, we have hundreds and hundreds of items of stock, and it's become a bit more complicated than we expected, and it's now online and we ship everywhere. So. But it constantly updates, and we have a small mailing list where we send out new things that we have in there. So it's still very rewarding, and it's nice because we don't have anybody who runs the shop. It's the designers in the office. So if somebody comes to the shop and rings the bell, a designer has to stop what they're doing and go and attend to the customer and wrap things up that we're very bad at. And it's nice for a designer to see that end stage of a product's life as well, because we're very involved in the kind of creation of the product and its development and production and detailing, the packaging design, blah, blah, blah. But then the very last moment of that object being in a shop and somebody deciding to own that object, the designer's never really there, but we can sort of take part in that, and it's nice fun to see somebody pick up the object that you've maybe worked on or is new, and see what they think about it. Turn it over and look at the price and put it down, or take it home.
I love that. And obviously in like larger corporations, big companies, that's sometimes a thing to do for, you have to spend a day in every department of the company, and I like that idea. And you don't advertise, you're not allowed to post anything, don't take pictures.
Yeah, we like to keep the shop like quite low key, so we tend to discourage people from taking pictures and posting stuff, because it's part of the joy of it is that when you come to the shop, it's quite hard to find because it's just in a small space in our studio. So when people come to the shop, they don't really know what they're expecting. So there's hopefully a moment of joy when you come through the door and you've found the shop, and then it's the first time you've seen it, and because there's not stuff really published or on social media about it so much, it's a kind of new experience, which in today's age is kind of quite rare to have. Or quite often we'll go to a gallery or an exhibition and you kind of know what's there before you get there, and so you're kind of disappointed or it's different to what you expected, but we try and manage people's expectations, which is fun.
I'm sure if we were able to take any questions from the audience, I'm pretty sure one at least would like to ask, what's it like working with Jasper Morrison?
It's really good. That's why I've been there for so long. Yeah. I think it's really good for lots of reasons. One reason is that he has a very strong reputation, obviously, and that gives the office quite an unusual degree of power in working with clients and brands, in being firmer than maybe some offices are, in deciding what we think is the right direction for an object. So it gives us a degree of flexibility with that, which is always nice. And it's in the office. Most of our work is actually not design work, which people maybe find surprising. The design, and if you look at some of the objects here, and there's a few sketches next to some of the objects, Jasper's designs tend to emerge quite easily, quite early, and quite quickly, and it'll often be a very simple sketch that Jasper will make that will capture the essence of that object. And so the work that we do in the office is trying to capture that essence and translate it with Jasper's really close involvement into a 3D object. And it's quite hard to capture the kind of magic of that first sketch, and it will take a lot of work to get the design to become a three-dimensional object that really has that same feeling. And that's just the start. And then after we have this, we've captured the feeling, we have to take that design and then work with the manufacturer who's manufacturing that and really protect the design and work very closely to ensure that they make it the way it's meant to be made, that every detail is exactly as we intended. And it's a whole about kind of delivering the design really and taking it right through to the very last step to make sure it comes out right. So there's we spend a lot of time annoying clients, I think, like complaining about very small details and saying, no, that's not right, can we do another sample, and really pushing things as hard as we can sometimes with some clients. And it can get frustrating with some clients, but generally at the end of the project, everyone's very happy and yeah, often it becomes an example of a good piece of design and a really good piece of that client's work as well.
So what makes an object successful then?
It's a combination of lots of things, I think. It's about, I guess, understanding the client's ability, what they are good at making, what they maybe don't make in-house, but they have to bring in from outside, and trying to combine that knowledge with some understanding of their market, and then bringing all that to bear through Jasper's filter of kind of sensibilities of how objects and their atmospheres work together, and trying to make something that both works as a design but works as a product for the company and works for their market as well. And it's a balancing act, and it's quite hard to get all those things to work, and it's something that we work quite hard on, and we try to work very closely with our partners to make that happen. And as most of the kind of way we work tends to be a royalty basis, we'll, if it is successful in the market, then everyone kind of shares in that success, which is nice.
Yeah. So this exhibition is called Objects and Atmosphere. Objects is obviously objects, the beautiful, the functional, unaffectedly beautiful items placed on these plinths in this Iittala Arabia space. But how does Jasper Morrison's studio define the idea of atmosphere then? What do you mean by atmosphere?
Yeah, it's a good question. The kind of concept of atmosphere is a reoccurring theme in Jasper's work. It kind of comes from Jasper's observation and realization that objects have a huge impact on the situation they're placed into. So, for example, if you take anybody's typical room and you just swap a chair out for another chair, you can have a dramatic impact on the atmosphere in that room. And so, as well as focusing on the objects, Jasper's always very mindful of the impact that object is going to have on an atmosphere. And you can't predict every situation an object's going to work in, but you can be kind of mindful of the object being kind of polite and humble in a way where it functions on serving its purpose rather than trying to make a statement about its owner or something else. And I think this exhibition is called Objects and Atmosphere, and we've tried to kind of capture an atmosphere of Jasper's work with the arrangement of objects as well. And these are objects that are from all through Jasper's career, from some very early pieces to some very recent contemporary pieces. So the selection was made, and it was quite hard to narrow that down and just choose these few pieces. But the atmosphere of them all working together is something that we try to work on. And I think that if you can get the atmosphere that the object creates or contributes to right, then it's an object that people seem to be able to live with for a lot longer and enjoy much more. And the object you've designed, the glass tends to be the one that people go for because it sort of feels right for the situation when you want to use it. It doesn't, the object doesn't require a special situation to be used. It's just a glass. It's not a glass for a special event or anything. And those objects tend to have a nicer feeling in the atmosphere of their environment, I think.
Absolutely. So atmosphere always ends up being, it also relates to the idea of a whole. So also when you select things, it includes the things that you didn't choose, and that space in between. So you do these publications, and Jasper Morrison is known as a thinker and a philosopher. Do you think a designer today has to have an ideology behind all the work?
I don't know. I think Jasper's ideology, if there is one, or the way of working, is really about just keeping his eyes open. Jasper spends a lot of time, there's various publications, as you can see here, doing things that don't seem to be specifically design related. For example, there's the Good Life book, there's this slideshow, A World Without Words, that's playing on the screen behind us here. And there's the publication from a anthropological museum in Portugal that's just everyday objects from historical Portuguese history. But these are all kind of activities where Jasper's looking at things, thinking about things, and it's kind of really topping up his thinking process and his kind of library of atmospheres and objects and sensibilities, really. And so it's that constantly looking at things that I think is kind of the kind of magic source that allows the ease of when he comes to design objects. The references he carries about with him and the way he looks at things continually really educates his mind in a way to be able to bring it out in objects and to distill quite quickly and quite effectively, something, what a certain type of chair should be, could be, how it can be. So it's about, constantly, I think, reading the world around you and absorbing that and then looking at things, both looking at their sculptural shape and form, but also looking at how they're made, I think, as a designer is. But you need to look at both. You need to always be able to look at an object and kind of understand at a glance how that's made. And if you don't understand how it's made, be able to go and find out. It should kind of bother you that you don't. So both understanding how things are made and looking at objects generally, I think, is really important.
Absolutely. And you said absorbing the world, and then that makes me think of also giving something to the world, which obviously are these beautiful objects and the publications and all the other work. I wonder, how do you see the role of a designer in the society, more general today?
I think it's a very important role, and it's, a designer doesn't want to be part of the problem. It's because we can't solve problems of more stuff by making more stuff, which tends to become, a bit of a dumb solution. But I think it's every designer's responsibility to really, if you're going to design an object, to design for the object rather than maybe for the client or their short-term marketing needs, to really think about how that object's going to have the longest possible life and really serve its function in a really effective way for a long time, so that we've all had that experience of owning an object that suddenly stops working, falls apart, you have to throw it away, and it's a very disappointing feeling. So I think it's very important that you think about how an object's going to really last its lifetime. And, it's an old idea, but, pass on to somebody else, to another generation even, and keep living. And I think that comes round to style as well, and making sure that an object is not too strong in terms of its kind of contemporary style, so it kind of manages to somehow be slightly timeless. It was interesting putting the exhibition together here with these objects. As I said, they're from all, from very old things to very new things, but they all kind of still work together and they feel fairly timeless, at least to my eyes. And I think that's one of the things that Jasper manages to do very well, is to kind of boil things down to a very simple essence that means it's kind of has a longer life and a meaning in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, one could argue that functionality and usability are supported by this self-explanatory aesthetics almost.
Yeah.
And this would make the best everyday objects maybe quite honest. They don't pretend something that they're not. Honesty adds trust, which happens to be the theme for this year's Helsinki Design Week. And as my last question, I wanted to ask, is trust something that you consider in your work?
I think it's, the end user, the customer who comes into our shop, they have an expectation, and that balances around the trust. They expect something from an object, from the designer, and there's maybe not much trust really in a lot of objects these days. We're all having to rebuy things that we shouldn't have to rebuy continually. So I think it comes back to what we were discussing before, in that objects should really, in a way, deliver and go beyond what the customer expects. Maybe customers' expectations are fairly low because of the disappointing results we've had from various large brands making cheap stuff. So it's always nice when you have an object that just never breaks, just keeps going, and sometimes over time objects can get better as well. And that's I think that trust needs to be maybe re-established a bit more between manufacturers and customers, where they can really expect that. And I think we're very lucky. We work with some very large clients that are, large brand names, and that we have the luxury of working with these people that have been around for a long time and hopefully will be around for a long time. So with clients like that, it's nice because you're in an environment where there is a lot of trust between the brand and the customer. So the pens that we designed for Lamy, for example, there's a lot of trust in that brand, and I think that the success of a brand like Lamy is because they have built trust over a long time with their customers. And so if the customers are happy, they're happy, the business is strong, because trust has been at the core of what they do, I think. And design is an essential ingredient in building that trust by making well-designed objects that perform well as well, I think.
Thank you so much for joining us in Helsinki and for this talk.
It's been my pleasure. I hope you all enjoy the exhibition.